Hello and welcome to the 49ers First and 10 podcast, 10 minutes of the most up-to-date 49ers news first thing in the morning. I'm your host, Brianna McDonald, and I'm with 49ers team reporter, Lindsay Polares. Today, we're going to dive into the team's latest free agency moves, the biggest news coming out of this year's annual league meeting, and what the NFL power rankings are looking like after the first waves of the free agency frenzy. So first things first, let's bring the First and 10 listeners up to speed on the team's latest roster moves. Since our last episode, the 49ers signed linebacker Ezekiel Turner to a one-year deal. Lindsay, can you share what you've learned about Ezekiel so far and what he brings to the team?
We have a lot to catch up on, Faithful. We only have one extra transaction to talk about, but we certainly have a lot of stuff coming later in the episode. Linebacker Ezekiel Turner spent 6 seasons with the Arizona Cardinals, so a fellow NFC West guy. He brings some depth to the linebacker room, which is certainly necessary right now with Dre Greenlaw still working back from that season-ending Achilles injury. He joins Javondre Campbell, Curtis Robinson, and Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, along with Fred Warner, of course. So with Ezekiel Turner, you have some depth to the linebacker room, and then also, which is a huge plus, he's a big special teams guy. He's played 300-plus special teams snaps in 4 of his 6 NFL seasons. He had 342 last year. So definitely a guy that's going to be a contributor in 2 phases of the ball. So let's all welcome Ezekiel Turner to the 49ers empire, and we'll see what other free agency moves go along as the offseason progresses.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. So over the past few days, you might have seen online all of the NFL coaches, general managers, and owners gather together. And that's because the annual league meeting was taking place at the beginning of the week. All the leadership figures met up in Orlando, Florida to vote on rule changes and provide league-wide updates before the 2024 season begins. And Lindsay wrote a fantastic article on 49ers.com that sums up everything the faithful need to know coming out of the league meeting. So let's run through the takeaways, a big one being free agency, since plenty of moves have been made between all the clubs. So what's general manager John Lynch's assessment of what his team is looking like right now?
Yeah, general manager John Lynch actually gave about 30 minutes of a recap, not just on free agency, but a lot of the different offseason hot topics surrounding the 49ers. Free agency was certainly one of them. 11 guys have been added since the start of the new league year. JL said free agency largely successful for the 49ers, and a lot of the players that the 49ers targeted were actually acquired. So all in all, a very positive free agency frenzy, first few waves for the 49ers. I think a lot of emphasis was put on the D line with the additions of Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, Malik Collins. Those were just some of the guys that, Lynch was able to speak deeply about during this press conference. But I think all in all, he said very productive. He's very proud of what the scouting department as well as the coaches were able to come together and agree on in terms of additions for the team. And I think one of the things that I thought was cool was that because coming out of that 2023 season, the 49ers had a lot of free agents ending their one-year deals. It looks like a big emphasis was to create a lot of 2-year deals, especially on that defensive line, so that it isn't a yearly turnover for the 49ers. And that's what happened with Floyd, Gross-Matos, Elliott, and then Malik Collins, who came via trade. He came from the Houston Texans, and he'll be under contract through the 2025 season. So hopefully a little bit less work during the free agency period this time next year for the 49ers brain trust.
Nice. He also spoke about a few key players who are working through injuries and off-season surgeries like Charvarius Ward, George Kittle, Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga. What's the health update on those 4? Is there anything the faithful should be concerned about? And when should we expect to see them ready for action again?
Yeah, so George Kittle's addition to this offseason recovery list was definitely a new name, one that I was not familiar with, but it sounds like him and Charvarius Ward both had offseason core muscle procedures. And for anyone not familiar with what a core muscle injury is, I looked it up because I wanted to give you guys the best explanation. And this is from the University of Kansas Health System, but it's an injury to the abdominal muscle and thigh muscle. Both those players, huge playmakers for the 49ers, had some offseason procedures. Typically, from what the University of Kansas says, the recovery time is 6 to 8 weeks after injury. Athletes can start returning to action, can start moving around. It sounds like John Lynch has also had this procedure throughout the course of his playing days. And he says that, once you get it done, you feel a lot better. And in terms of prognosis for those two players, it sounds like they will be ready by the time training camp starts. So obviously a lot of time till then. He also said that was a conservative timeline. Timelines can always get longer or get shorter. So take that with a grain of salt. Be flexible on that timeline. When it comes to Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, both of those players suffered season-ending injuries at different times of the 2023 season. Talanoa Hufanga went down in Week 11 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had an ACL injury. If everyone remembers, we saw Jair Brown step into that starter role once Talanoa Hufanga was unable to play. It sounds like he's doing really well, according to John Lynch. He said he's a hard worker. He's doing a great job progressing through that rehab. Dre Greenlaw also working through a season-ending Achilles injury. We saw him go down in the second quarter of Super Bowl 58. It appeared to be a non-contact injury. He was just trying to retake the field along with the rest of the defensive unit, and it was just kind of a freak injury. In terms of him, JL said that he knows that Dre Greenlaw is like inching to get back and he really wants to be out there with his team. He said if you ask Dre, he'll be ready for week 1, but conservatively speaking, with a more realistic timeline for that Achilles injury, he thinks that Dre Greenlaw may be a physically unable to perform situation, which means that he would likely not be ready for the start of the 2024 season, but we'll continue monitoring that and seeing how he progresses through the rest of the offseason. We still got like 3-ish plus months until we actually get to the start of everything again. So we'll keep you posted on that.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Lindsay Polaris, for doing the for us.
I know. I needed to get everyone the answers because, you never know with these injuries. There's a lot of injuries that NFL players go through the course of the season. So wanted to bring a little more info to that.
Thank you so much. And a trending topic as of recently is how the 49ers are approaching potential deals with wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk, who's entering his 5th season this year. What did John Lynch have to say about the communication between the team and BA?
I think we have to look at the positives with the Brandon Aiyuk contract talks. The talks are happening, and that's something that general manager John Lynch really emphasized. The organization feels so highly about Brandon Aiyuk and his contributions to the team over the last 4 seasons. That continues to be reiterated. Conversations about his future in the Bay Area are happening, so that's really the big update, and that he's valued by this organization. There is a desire to keep him here. And you have to just look at history with the 49ers. They have a really good track record of signing these players that they draft and develop. So that's the update. Also, JL did put an end to any trade rumors that are going around with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's not happening. So everybody put your minds at ease in terms of that. We'll keep you posted with this too. This is going to be an ongoing topic throughout the offseason.
Yep. Well, that pretty much takes us through all the updates regarding the Niners specifically. But starting yesterday, there are now a few new rules to look out for in this upcoming season. Lindsay, could you share what some of the biggest ones are?
Yeah, there's quite a few to go through. I'll just highlight some of them. I think one of the ones that was unanimously agreed upon was the hip drop tackle that has now been banned, and it's the swivel version of this. And again, I have the official language because I don't want to get anything wrong here. Essentially, it's when the technique to bring a runner to the ground, A, grabs the runner with both hands, or wraps the runner with both arms and unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. This is a move essentially to just keep NFL players safer and to avoid serious injuries, which is something that everyone wants, obviously unanimously banned. So that's one of the changes. There were changes to the kickoff rule, and it's hard to describe this. There's a lot of rules associated with what this is going to look like, but if you want to get a clearer picture, it's very similar to the current XFL kickoff rules. So if you want a reference point for that, I thought another one that is particularly interesting is the designated to return players during the playoffs. Typically, or as has been the case before this rule was passed, players, coaches, and teams really have to be strategic with who they bring on and off the injured reserve list throughout the year. Typically, there's only been 8 designations allowed through the regular season and playoffs. A new rule change was proposed by the Lions. So now teams have an unlimited number of designated to return transactions during the playoffs. I do see this as a benefit for anyone that is going into an extended postseason run. There's new replay changes, quite a few. Was there one that stuck out to you, Bree, on this very long list?
Yeah, definitely. There are a few other things that stuck out to me when reviewing the rules, and one of them being the NFL trade deadline will be 1 week later. This was a change proposed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So instead of a week 8 trade deadline, the date has been moved back to week 9. And when I think about this, I think about the 49ers midseason acquisition for running back Christian McCaffrey. So I'm curious to see what deals might be taking place in the midst of the season. Another one is that coaches will get a third challenge. So coaches no longer have to win their first 2 challenges to then get a third challenge. Now they only have to win one of their first 2 challenges to be awarded a third. Another one is that change of possession plays might look a little bit different. There's going to be an enforcement of fouls. So during a play that results in a possession change, if fouls are committed by both teams, any major offensive fouls like unnecessary roughness calls that are committed before the possession change will now be enforced. So a lot of different things to look out for.
Yeah, definitely. There's also going to be like an expansion to the emergency quarterback rule, which was new last season. Now, emergency third quarterbacks can be elevated from both the 53-man roster and the practice squad. So, again, a lot of tweaks that will help improve the game going into the 2024 season.
All right, now to close out today's episode, let's check in on where the 49ers rank amongst all the teams in the league now that some rosters have been changed up a bit. So, Lindsay, what's the consensus on where San Francisco lands versus the rest of the NFL?
Basically, every major outlet that you're going to look at, the 49ers are landing either at number 2 or number 3 after their free agency moves. Again, 11 new players added since the start of the new league year. I feel really good about that. If that's the consensus across the media and just the enthusiasm headed into this 2024 season, that's awesome. The draft hasn't even happened yet, so there's going to be definitely a lot of talent added there. And I know we keep talking about it, but you have to get excited about the 49ers having a first round draft pick again, something that hasn't happened since the 2021 season.
It's always great to hear that the Niners are among the top in the league, but that will do it for today. Be in the know on all of the latest official 49ers news by following First and 10 on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to turn on the notifications for any breaking news updates, and thank you, Faithful, for tuning in.